Governor John J. Rankin, CMG. I will now invite His Excellency to give his remarks regarding his quarterly review of the Commission of Inquiry recommendations implementation.
Good day. On the 4th of October, I was pleased to publish the first quarterly review of the framework for implementation of the recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry report and other reforms. The framework which was agreed between the United Kingdom and the Government of National Unity. The quarterly review is a key part of the process for monitoring the implementation of the Commission of Inquiry recommendations. The review was sent to the United Kingdom for consideration by ministers, and I have now received a letter in response from the Right Honourable Jessie Norman MP, Minister for the Americas and Overseas Territories, and as I promised on the 4th of October, this will now be published and shared with people in the BVI so that they can see and read it for themselves. The first and most important point that was made in the quarterly review was that there has been good progress in a number of areas with work underway on most recommendations. The review also noted that I was pleased with the overall constructive engagement and partnership I have had with the Premier and Cabinet. Most of the deadlines in the framework have been met on time, and where there have been delays, I was satisfied that this has been for legitimate reasons. So, while there's a long way to go in implementation of the COI recommendations to achieve the deep-rooted reforms in governance that are required, I'm pleased to stress that there has been a good start in many areas with many positives. To take a number of examples, the Audit Act has been amended to make failure to cooperate with or impede the work of the Auditor General a criminal offence. The recommended police investigations are underway. The Auditor General is conducting the recommended audits. Responsibility for assistance grants has been transferred to the Social Development Department, with a review of the welfare benefits and grant system now taking place with the support of UNICEF. All positive examples of the progress which has been made. The review also raised some concerns in particular areas, including on the continued use of tender waivers and on making the register of interests for members of the House of Assembly more openly available. Let me address the tender waiver issue in some more detail. The Commission of Inquiry found that there was no open tender in 2/3 of all contracts valued over $100,000 between January 2019 and April 2021. This, combined with contract splitting into petty contracts, was a disregard for good governance, transparency and accountability. And that is why in the framework document it was agreed that Cabinet documents relating to tender waivers should be published. Unfortunately, such waivers continue to come forward to Cabinet. I recognise that many of these to date have been legacy issues arising from the practices of the previous administration. But it remains important that we avoid tender waivers as much as possible and that the commitment to publication is kept. Since the framework document for implementation of the COI recommendations was agreed, the new Public Procurement Act has of course become law. Tender waivers are no longer required, and the Act permits single source procurement in specified circumstances. But single source procurement means no open tendering, and the Act expressly makes clear that such procurement should only take place in exceptional circumstances. So looking forward, if 2/3 of all contracts simply become single source procurements, rather than tender waivers, then not much will have changed. I very much hope that will not be the case, and I will continue to work constructively with the government to support open tendering as much as possible and to ensure that the new Public Procurement Act is fully complied with. On the Register of Interests, the concern set out in the quarterly review was that the amendments passed by the House of Assembly mean that the Register of Members' Interests has been made public only in a highly restricted way, with persons wishing to view the register having to make a written application and having to pay a fee. They would then only be allowed to view the register in the presence of the registrar and would not be permitted to take any kind of copy or even notes of the contents and fined for reproducing the contents. My hope is that the government and members of the House of Assembly will reflect further on their amendments and whether changes might be made to the Act which will more fully reflect the principles of transparency set out in the framework document. For my part, I will be happy to work constructively with the government towards that end. Let me now turn directly to the response received from the Minister for the Overseas Territories. As you will see, in his letter, Minister Norman expressly recognises that there has been some real progress in implementation of the COI recommendations and that most deadlines have been met. He was also pleased to learn of the Premier and the Cabinet's overall continued commitment to driving delivery in a constructive partnership. The Minister also notes the concerns expressed in the quarterly review, including in relation to tender waivers. He notes that the framework document contained a clear commitment to ensuring that tender waivers are only agreed in exceptional, unavoidable cases and which must be explained publicly, and that under the Public Procurement Act, single source procurement must only be used in exceptional circumstances. The Minister makes clear his expectation that there will be immediate and substantial improvement in this area, while recognising that there may be some legacy procurement issues from the previous administration which should be addressed proactively and promptly. The Minister asked me to submit a report at the start of December on the issue of tender waivers and single source procurement so that he can assess progress ahead of the next quarterly review in the public interest. The Minister concludes his letter by agreeing overall that progress in this initial period of Commission of Inquiry implementation has been sufficient to continue the current approach. But he notes that it's vital that this is maintained with commitments and deadlines met. And he notes that the people of the BVI want and deserve reform and that the UK government remains committed to taking the necessary actions to ensure that they see that reform delivered. Finally, and further to his letter, I'm pleased to let you know that Minister Norman is planning to visit the BVI next Thursday and Friday, 27th and 28th October. This will be an excellent opportunity for the Minister to meet the Premier, Ministers and members of the House of Assembly and other key interlocutors and to listen to their views. I know that the Minister's goal is to see a successful, thriving, well-governed BVI. That is a goal which I share as Governor and to which I remain committed. There's more to be done and more hard work ahead. But if we continue to work together to implement the Commission of Inquiry recommendations, then I'm confident that this can lead to the improved governance, transparency and accountability that the people of the BVI deserve. Thank you.
We will now open up the floor for questions from the media. Please note that it will only have 2 questions per media entity.
Please, Kathy.
Good morning, Governor. Good morning, everyone. Kathy Richards, JTV News. Governor, on the release of your report, your first report, it was observed by the Government of National Unity, as said by the Premier, that there were some slight misunderstanding or misinterpretation, especially as it relates to the tender waiver process. Did you and the Premier or the legislative body have subsequent discussions on this, and were there any clarity to this claim made?
Thank you. Yes, of course, I listened to the Honourable Premier's remarks, and he and I have since had some discussions on the issue. I'm not going to go into the detail of what are private discussions, but my remarks this morning are, I hope, clarifying the issue. There are obviously sometimes different perspectives on these matters, but my hope is that tender waivers will be as few as possible, and that single source procurement under the Public Procurement Act will be in exceptional circumstances, which is indeed the test under the Act that has to be met.
Can you give some clarity to what you quoted the Minister as saying as it relates to legacy procurement issues, which he is asking to be addressed promptly?
Yes, I certainly can. Some of the tender waivers which are now coming through to Cabinet for approval are as a result of what happened under the previous administration led by former Premier Foy. And in certain circumstances, a tender waiver retrospectively may be required. And that isn't something which is, a matter of a blame for the current administration. But it's a legacy issue which we need to clear up and then move forward positively from there.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Morning, Governor.
Good morning.
Zan Lewis, ZBVI Radio. Governor, in your first review that you put out, you explained now here also in this the press conference the problems you had with the tendering situation. Before you went public with that first review, before you decided to send it to the UK, did you at any time sat down and talk with government to say, these are the problems, let's deal with it before I send it off?
Yes, of course, this is a subject that has been a matter of dialogue between myself and the government.
So, and you went ahead still because the government claimed that basically they were dissatisfied because they had a meeting with you after. So are you saying, sir, that you went ahead because they did not abide, they ignored what you were telling them while you continue and sent it off?
No, not at all. I mean, this remains a matter of dialogue, which between us we need to resolve constructively. So that is the objective. But of course, it is my duty to point out the requirements in the framework document. And the requirements in the framework document are that tender waivers obviously should be exceptional, and where they are required, they should be published. That's a commitment the government has made, and therefore, as Governor, I think it is my duty to draw attention to it.
Governor, the very often we get you before, so allow me to slip in next question too. The Premier said that having this order in council and also having this document to suspend the BVI's constitution if certain the implementation goes wrong. The governor, he said, it's a flawed concept. The Premier said that. First of all, how do you see such statement by the Premier stating that the ordering council and the decision whether or not to suspend the BVI constitution is a flawed concept? That's one. It's a two-part question. And secondly, sir, the Premier said he told the people in the BVI to wake up. and he is willing to take the lead. He is willing to be in the forefront, to take the lead, to not march, but to show their disagreement with this order in council and to suspend the constitution. Will you, sir, be willing to get out of Government House and join that action, because you said you love the people, to join that action with the people and the Premier to ask for the UK government to reconsider and to remove that order in council?
Thank you. I think the first thing I would say to that is that, of course, the agreement that was reached with the Government of National Unity was a commitment to implement 48 of the 49 COI recommendations. And on the 49th recommendation, which was actually for a partial temporary suspension of the Constitution, it was agreed between the UK government and the BVI government that that step would not take place in return for the clear commitments that were made. But the order in council was brought in as an insurance that if there is a failure in the commitment to deliver, that swift action could be taken to remedy the situation. The second thing I would say is that the order in council is something that, if it were brought into force, would only be triggered after a certain process. And this is made explicitly clear in the framework document, that if there were a delay in implementation without legitimate excuse, this will trigger consultations between the Governor, the Premier, and the relevant actors to assess and address the delay. So that's what would happen if there were a significant failure in implementation of the framework agreement. And lastly, my reply to you would be that we are at the very early stages of the process. We estimate that implementation of all the recommendations will be a 2-year process. This is my first review after just the first 3 months of implementation. So I think it would be premature at this stage to take the action that's been suggested, but it is of course entirely legitimate for the Honourable Premier to raise the issue if he wishes in discussions with the Honourable Minister when he visits.
So you're not
I'd
willing
like to remind ZBVI that he's reached his maximum amount of questions.
So, Governor, I have one important
to your colleagues,
question.
I ask that you allow them to ask their questions.
I think I've given a clear answer to the question. Thank you.
No, I have one question for you. So because not very often
I'd
we
like
get
to
you
ask
before,
ZBVI to please take a seat and allow his colleagues to ask their questions.
Will you take the question? Have one more question?
Let's give other colleagues a chance to answer their questions, please.
Good morning, Governor. Dean Greenaway, Virgin Islands Daily News. As a part of the reform process, I've noticed that Crown Lands is an area. I've also noticed that there's an ad from your office seeking someone to work in that area. Is there a reason why this has been taken from the ministry, the local ministry that has lands, that has a responsibility for lands, and is being taken by the governor? And what triggered that?
Thank you. It's set out in the framework document. It's a pre-review process of Crown land disposals before ultimately they're signed off by the governor. So files are now coming to me to review, and that is because of the issues which the Commission of Inquiry identified that raising some concerns over Crown land disposals. Indeed, one of them is under a specific investigation. So it's a pre-review process which I will carry out. Files are just arriving in my office now. As regards the advertisement to which you refer, yeah, we're looking for a new member of staff to assist us, but not just in the area of Crown lands, but in all the other busy work which the Governor's Office has in this and related areas.
So will this go back then to the ministry after this whole process is over?
The disposals, I think I'm correct in saying, have always been for the Governor to sign off. What's been added is a pre-review process before finalisation, and you'll see it explicitly in the framework document.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Governor Kamal Haynes from 284 Media. My first question pertains to the quarterly review report that you would have issued, where you would have mentioned that several reviewers and investigators who were currently leading the reviews and investigation audits were met with oftentimes difficulties in terms of assessing certain documents. We did ask that question at the Premier's press conference, where the Permanent Secretary did say that there were situations where there probably were delays, but not. There was no situation where the respective persons or ministries, etc., were not cooperating with the respective requests of your office, etc., or the investigators, etc. So my question to you, following the statement you would have made in your quarterly review report, did you find any, in terms of evidence to support the claims of these claims that would have came to you of such, stating that they would have had some form of hesitancy in terms of some requests to the relevant ministries?
As the quarterly review makes clear, there were some delays in the reviewers getting the documents which they were seeking. So what I stated in my quarterly review was factual. But I also welcome the Premier's remarks in this area. And the implementation unit, excuse me, is now up and fully running. I'm not aware of any recent challenges which have arisen in this area, and provided the required documents continue to be provided to the reviewers, and I'm satisfied that proper progress is being made.
Okay. My second question, with all that's going on with the United Kingdom now, with the situation, the political situation, the instability of the Liz Truss administration, what impact would that have on the overseas territories as well as the COA implementation?
I believe that the United Kingdom's commitment to supporting the BVI as an overseas territory will remain unchanged. And the fact that Minister Norman is now coming here next week, early in his appointment as a Minister for the Overseas Territories, I think is a clear demonstration of that. So I don't expect any change in that commitment of support for the BVI and commitment to supporting the work of implementation of the Commission of Inquiry recommendations.
Good morning, Governor Rankin. Dana Campo with the BVI Beacon. So our first question has to do with the register of interest concerns that you had highlighted. So have any members of the House of Assembly indicated that they intend to make any sort of amendments to make the process a bit more transparent? And if they don't consider making any changes, would you still consider assenting to the bill?
I've had some discussions on this issue, and I hope that members of the House of Assembly now will give further consideration to the possibility of a clarification amendment of the Register of Interest bill. So let's see if that process works. And then once we've seen the outcome of that process, then of course I'll take a final decision in relation to assent to the bill.
All right. And the House yesterday debated the Jury Act, and one of the big points of contention was whether residents who either have 10 years of residency or a certificate of residency should become potential jurors. And we know this legislation is coming from the Deputy Governor's office. So do you believe that this is a good move for expanding the jury pool? Do you understand the concerns that some of the members are expressing?
I believe it would be a good move. Again, this is addressed in the Commission of Inquiry report. And I think it would be a good move for two reasons. One is, at the moment, the number of people on the jury list is a limited number. And there can be challenges in empanelling a jury which might not know the persons involved or know more details of the facts involved than you wish in a jury. So having a wider jury list helps to ensure you have a jury which will be objective. And the second point I would make is that as a matter of fundamental justice, people have a right to be tried by their peers. And if you restrict the jury to only one set of persons living here in the BVI, then you reduce the opportunity that it is a jury of peers who are judging the person. So I believe it would be a positive move, and I hope that the House of Assembly will deal with the issue constructively.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Governor, can I ask one question?
Yes, please. I'm happy for you to ask one more question, sir. But I hope you'll understand
Yes,
it was
because
right
you
for.
asked.
Sorry, I hope you'll understand it was right for me to give other
Everyone
members of the
first.
press the opportunity to ask their questions
Thank
first.
you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Because you asked all the media and it depends on you. Governor, the Najan Christopher was arrested and charged some time ago for breach of trust as a public officer. We know, okay, she was arrested and charged for that, for breach of trust, because she's accused of submitting a document to the US court concerning the former premier. And I believe she was arrested at the time when she was carrying out her duties. The police commissioner, who is also a senior public officer, some time ago made a video in Paradise, a video public. He brought out something that embarrassed the territory severely. He brought out something which showed evidence of a case that is being investigated. Yet, no breach of trust was brought against him as a public officer. I want to know from you, sir, why that did not happen. And secondly, sir, as you being a lawyer, give me a definition. What is breach of trust? One, these two persons, one was charged, one was not there. What
Thank
is
you.
breach of trust, and why the police commissioner did not face charges?
Thank you for what I think were two questions, in fact.
There's one question. Thank
Zan.
you.
I'm not going to comment on the particular circumstances of Ms. Christopher, which you will understand is now a matter which will go before the courts. So I hope you'll understand it would be incorrect of me to comment on the detail of that issue. But otherwise, I think the comparison you've made between the two is not an apt comparison. And as you may recall, this issue was due to be considered by the National Security Council, and indeed has been considered by the National Security Council. The National Security Council, of course, noted that the video had been a matter of high concern and a matter of high interest. But they also noted that the Commissioner of Police, in his statement on the 27th of June, had made an apology in relation to the use of the video, and the Council was satisfied that there was no malicious intent by the Commissioner of Police. The Council accepted that the Commissioner of Police had made clear his regret as to how the video was leaked and how it came into public knowledge. The Council also acknowledged and agreed that the material and general content of the leaked video were already in wide circulation in the public domain. And subsequently, the Council welcomed the fact that the perpetrators in one of the scenes in the leaked video was actually apprehended. The NSC also noted and acknowledged that there had been some consultation between the Commissioner of Police and an official at the BVI Tourist Board. Council was also informed that there was no contractual agreement drawn up and there was no exchange of money to produce the video Police in Paradise. And Council has received confirmation that the leaked video would not be aired on ITV in the United Kingdom. So that was consideration which the NSC jointly gave to the issue. There was absolutely no criminal offence committed by the Police Commissioner, breach of trust or otherwise. Thank you for your question, sir.
But did Christopher give him that privilege also at the
Thank you
commissioner got?
for your question, sir.
Okay.
I'd like to invite GTV to ask one additional question.
Indeed.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Governor, as it relates to the pending general elections for the Virgin Islands, is there any likelihood that elections, the House of Assembly can be dissolved before May of 2023 or way after May of 2023?
Should there be any proposal to that effect, it's something on which I would obviously consult the Premier and the Leader of the Opposition, but I, at this point, have no intention of taking any dissolution action myself in this area.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's press briefing. I'd like to thank the media for their continued support and engagement, and I wish everybody a happy rest of their day.
Thank you.